Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, January 12th, 2020, and we are live. Happy New Year to everybody. If you haven't tuned in, if you missed the show last Sunday, January 5th, okay? We're live and we're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook, as well as 910 AM Superstation's Facebook page also. And we're on my YouTube channel as well, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. All right, so hope everybody's doing well tonight. All right, so we have a lot to talk about tonight. First of all, Iran retaliates with missile strike in response to U.S. killing of General Soliemani. Trump's explanation for the assassination keeps changing day by day. And within 48 hours, we saw the explanation just keep changing. Then he starts talking about embassies being hit. And then it went from embassy to embassies. From Thursday morning to Thursday night, it went from embassy to embassies. Now he's talking about possibly 4 embassies. The Secretary of Defense Mark Esper was on the Sunday morning shows this morning, and he said he didn't see intelligence backing up Trump's claim Iran was preparing to attack 4 embassies. So as time goes on, as days go on, as they do more talking, it's causing everybody to ask more questions. And the questions people are asking is what's really going on. So also, last week I didn't get a chance to get to the topic of why the Emancipation Proclamation signed by President Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1863 did not free the enslaved Africans. So we know January 1st was the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. This is during the Civil War. And the initial Emancipation Proclamation was issued September 22nd, 1863. And this was a military strategy to bring the South back into the Union. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free the enslaved Africans. The goal was to strip the South of the enslaved Africans, which their wealth was invested in, and they were using the slaves to dig ditches, to cook food, all different types of things like this. So we'll talk some about that history. Then also we've seen a lot of information dealing with the year of return, 2019, and we see that Nigeria is launching a initiative called it's a play on the year of return as well, bringing Africans from the diaspora back to Nigeria. Well, Idris Elba, hip hop artist and actor Ludacris, and other African Americans have been granted African citizenship. We'll talk some about that. And then we know hip-hop artist Nipsey Hussle, hip-hop artist and entrepreneur Nipsey Hussle, who was tragically killed in 2019. We know he was an avid reader, and after he was killed, articles came out about the types of books he was reading. Well, the Marathon Book Club has launched, and it's going to open throughout the U.S. in honor of Nipsey Hussle, and it's going to empower African American men through reading as well. So we'll talk about that as well. Right now on the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now we deal with a number of different topics here. We deal with current events, history, politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Sign up for the email newsletter right there on the website. You can also, so we have a new DVD bundle pack. It's a 15, and I just added an additional one, a 16 DVD bundle pack, Black History Month bundle pack. It includes 16 of my lectures, including one dealing with the history of African American History Month, or Black History Month. That's on sale right now, $100 at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, right on the homepage, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We know African American History Month is coming up starting February 1st. All right, so sign up for our email newsletter, and then also you can donate to the African History Network. PayPal.me/TheAHNShow. PayPal.me/TheAHNShow, and then also through Cash App, $TheAHNShow through Cash App as well. All right, so this past week was a bizarre, exhausting week. Just keeping track of what was going on coming out of the Trump administration. Okay, we saw a changing story, changing day to day, and the story of why Trump ordered the killing of Iranian General Soleimani continues to change from day to day. Now, this happened while Iran retaliated against the U.S. For the killing. On Wednesday, January 8th, 2020, Iran fired more than a dozen missiles at 2 Iraqi air bases that housed U.S. forces in retaliation. Now, no one was hurt in this attack, all right? But Iran is saying that there's going to be more to come as well. Now, Iran took credit for the attack also. This was not a U.S. base. This was an Iraqi base, but you had Iraqi and U.S. forces that were housed on the base. Now, Washington and Tehran is the capital of Iran, both confirmed that Iran was the source of the missiles. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said the strikes were a, quote, slap in the face, end quote. The strikes were a, quote, slap in the face to the U.S. and not sufficient retaliation for the killing of Qasem Soleimani. Now, in a White House address, Donald Trump said, quote, no Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime. We suffered no casualties. Our great American forces are prepared for anything. Iran appears to be standing down, end quote. He went on to tweet, all is well, and so far so good. Now, there were a number of lies being told by the Trump administration this past week. We saw this morning on the Sunday morning shows, the Secretary of Defense, almost called him defense attorney, Secretary of Defense Mark Esper was trying to spin this as well, okay? I'm going to go to this first clip here. We'll go to this clip from Friday, the last word, the 11th hour, Friday, the 11th hour on MSNBC. And this is talking about, this is dealing with the changing explanation, okay? So let me just set this up here. So Thursday, this past Thursday morning, Trump was at the White House and he gave a press conference. And he said that Soleimani was planning an attack on one of our embassies. He said planning an attack on an embassy. Embassy plural. Thursday night, Trump gave a rally in Ohio, okay? And he said Soleimani was planning an attack on embassies, plural, embassies. U.S. senators who were in the Senate briefing said that they were not told that Soleimani was planning an attack on embassies. Friday morning, Trump is interviewed by Laura Ingraham for Fox News. Trump says he believes that Soleimani was planning an attack on 4 embassies. He believes 4 embassies. So now you're adding a specific number. You had a number of U.S. senators who said we were not told attacks were being planned on embassies. 1. 2, the embassies were not alerted that attacks were being planned on them, so they can fortify the embassies. Okay? So we see this story continues to change day by day. And another thing is, so if you go back and listen to Sunday night show, and we re-aired it on our, we rebroadcasted it on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. It's uploaded on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. And it's also in audio podcast format. All these shows are basically in audio podcast format. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. On the homepage, click on Listen to Podcasts, right? So after last Sunday's show, January 5th, the article came out. I saw the article later that day and on Monday from the Washington Post. This article came out January 5th, 2020, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I saw it after my show last week. Killing of Soleimani follows long push from Pompeo for aggressive action against Iran, but airstrike brings serious risks. Killing of Soleimani follows long push from Pompeo for aggressive action against Iran, but airstrike brings serious risks. So this article from the Washington Post revealed to us that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had been urging Donald Trump for months to kill Qasem Soleimani. No wonder Mike Pompeo was on the Sunday morning shows last Sunday, all over the Sunday morning shows, trying to spin this and justify this and saying the threat was imminent and things like this. So you have more and more people in Congress asking what was the imminent threat. Because from day to day, the threat changes. Let's go to this clip from the last word, MSNBC, Brian Williams.
With Laura Ingraham from earlier today, Pelosi's decision means the trial could get underway sometime next week, but we'll also be discussing this with one of our guests tonight. These things start slowly at first. And this finds the president presently caught up in the growing controversy about the shifting justifications for the drone strike against the Iranian General Soleimani. Here is some of what we have heard from the president and his people just yesterday.
We had very good intelligence that there was an imminent attack being planned. It was imminent. You know, you never know the time and place of these things with perfect particularity, but we had very good information that there were imminent attacks.
There is no doubt that there were a series of imminent attacks that were being plotted by Qasem Soleimani. We don't know precisely when, and we don't know precisely where, but it was real.
Soleimani was actively planning new attacks, and he was looking very seriously at our embassies, and not just the embassy in Baghdad.
Then this morning, Secretary Pompeo was back before reporters with a slightly different account.
We had specific information on an imminent threat, and those threat stream included attacks on U.S. embassies. Period. Full stop.
So you were mistaken when you said you didn't know precisely when and you didn't know precisely where.
No, completely true. Those are completely consistent thoughts.
Why can you say that here and the president could say it at a rally in Toledo, but no one said it to lawmakers behind closed doors in a classified setting, as multiple senators have since said?
We did.
You said so. The senators are lying when they say that
we told them about the imminent threat. All of the intelligence that we've briefed, that you've heard today, I assure you, in an unclassified setting, we provide in the classified setting as well.
To be clear, you told them that.
Right there. Okay, so here's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying that they told the senators in a classified briefing that there were threats coming to embassies. The senators are saying, no, you didn't. You didn't tell us about this. But the question was, if you told the senator, so the whole thing is starting to unravel. Okay? First of all, we find out January 5th from the article from the Washington Post that Mike Pompeo, the guy you just heard talking and saying we told the senators, he had been urging Trump for months to kill Soleimani. We didn't know that. Okay? Then you had senators more and more saying, wait a second, you didn't tell us that embassies were, that Soleimani was planning to attack embassies. You didn't tell us that at all. Not only that, the question people are asking is, well, wait a second. If you're saying that embassies were being threatened and he was planning to attack embassies, did you alert the embassies so that they could be aware, so they can be on guard? But then the article comes out January 9th, 2020, from the Wall Street Journal. Trump's new national security team made fast work of Iran strike. Trump's new national security team made fast work of Iran strike. White House advisors were cohesive and less inclined than their predecessors to push back against the president's wishes. So this article here, I think it's probably about paragraph 29. This article talks about how Trump killed Soleimani allegedly because he was being urged by certain Republican senators to do so, and because he needs them to vote in his favor in the impeachment trial that's coming up soon, he went along with this. This is what the article from the Wall Street Journal reveals. Now Trump says that's a lie. It's fake news, right? But day after day, their story keeps changing. All right, I know we're coming up on a break. Let's squeeze in some more of this clip here. Let's go back to this clip from the 11th hour.
Embassies were to be targeted. That was the imminent threat.
I'm not going to talk about the details of what we shared in the classified setting.
So that's how that went, and not long after that, Trump divulged more information to Fox News.
Don't the American people have a right to know what specifically was targeted without revealing methods and sources?
Well, I don't think so, but we will tell you that probably it was going to be the embassy in Baghdad. I can reveal that I believe it would have been 4 embassies.
Okay, let's pause it there. Okay, and we're going to pick this up on the other side of the break. Why? So the senators and also members of Congress were briefed in a skiff, which is a self-contained unit, and it's highly secure. You can't take cell phones in, you can't take recording devices, you can't take cameras. How is it Trump can tell Laura Ingraham about the embassies being attacked in an interview on Fox News? How is it that Trump can tell people attending a rally in Ohio about this, but you can't tell senators and congresspeople who have a security clearance, who are in the skiff? You can't warn them, but Trump can tell the American people. How is this? Then, Mark Esper, Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, this morning, he was on the Sunday morning shows, and NBC News has the article, Washington Post has the article. You don't take my word for this. He said he hasn't seen any evidence, hasn't seen any of the intelligence. Was his exact word. Esper said he didn't see intelligence backing up Trump claim Iran was preparing to attack 4 embassies. What is going on? We're going to try to figure this out on the other side of the break. 9:10 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep, the African History Network Show. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network Show right here on 9:10 AM Superstation WFDF. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, January 12th, 2020. Okay, and we are live tonight. I got to give a shout out to my brothers of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. We just celebrated our Founders Day, January 9th. Okay, and also the sisters of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated have their 100th anniversary coming up January 16th. Okay, so shout out to the sisters of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. All right, so those on Facebook watching us on our fan page, The African History Network, we have Daryl, Sandy, Emmanuel, Maurice, Sis Ray Lay, Rosemary, Deshaun, one of my frat brothers, Deshaun Farad. Okay, if you're blackworld.net, let's see who else we have here. We've got Urkia, Flyonicia, okay. Patricia, just a few of the people, Zuri, just a few people watching us on our fan page, The African History Network, and people watching us on our YouTube channel. Michael Imhotep have got that up and running. Mr. Tyrone, Eric, Tillman Green Jr., Miss Britton, W. Canty, Sherwin, Barbara, just a few people watching us there as well. Okay, so that clip, JT, back that up about 30 seconds. Okay, so right before the break, now this clip here, I want you all to go watch it in its entirety, all right? This is at msnbc.com. This is from the 11th hour. Name of this clip, Pelosi Clears Way for Trump's Impeachment Trial to Begin. This is from Friday, January 10th, 2020. Go watch the entire clip. It's about 7 minutes. Okay, I don't have time to get through the whole clip. Okay, but I'm getting to the most important part. This deals with, so more, day after day, this appears more like a cover-up. Okay? Day after day, this appears more like a cover-up. All right? Now, then the other thing is, right, we found out, let's see, what day was that? Because all this stuff is happening so quickly. We found out that the same day that they killed Soleimani, they tried to kill another high-ranking Iranian who was in Yemen. The same day. All this stuff is starting to come out. And you have to ask the question, well, wait a second, what's really going on here? All right, let's go back to this clip here, JT.
That's how that went, and not long after that, Trump divulged more information to Fox News.
Don't the American people have a right to know what specifically was targeted without revealing methods and sources?
Well, I don't think so, but we will tell you that probably it was going to be the embassy in Baghdad. I can reveal that I believe it would have been 4 embassies.
Lawmakers who were in the administration's classified briefing earlier this week said this was news to them.
There is nothing that substantiates that claim, either that has been provided by the President or the Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense, either publicly or in our briefing.
There has been this evolving, contradictory set of stories, which again speaks to not only the need for us to have a full briefing, but it speaks to the importance of having a full-fledged discussion and debate about the War Powers Act.
Meanwhile, importantly, the Washington Post reports a senior administration official and a senior defense official as saying, quote, they were only aware of vague intelligence about a plot against the embassy in Baghdad and that the information did not suggest a fully formed plot. Neither official said there were threats against multiple embassies. The defense official added there was concern that there might be an attempt to place a bomb at the Baghdad embassy, a heavily fortified structure in a secure area of the Iraqi capital. Post also says the U.S. tried and failed to take out another Iranian military commander, this one in Yemen, that the attempt on his life took place on the same day as the Soleimani killing. The administration has imposed new penalties on Iran today officially, announcing new economic sanctions targeting exports and 8 separate Iranian officials. Wall Street Journal has new reporting about how Trump's national security team handled the original decision to carry out the strike on Soleimani, as well as on the president's thinking. One of the authors of this piece, Michael Bender, is standing by to join us in just a moment. He and his colleagues report, quote, Mr. Trump, after the strike, told associates he was under pressure to deal with General Soliemani from GOP senators he views as important supporters in his coming impeachment trial in the Senate. Calling to mind something Trump said about Obama. This was back in 2011.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran.
And because of the adage that there's always a tweet, it has proven true in this case. In order to get elected, Barack Obama will start a war with Iran back in 2011. It's been an eventful week, to say the least, and the anxiety was plainly evident across the political spectrum.
Nancy Pelosi does it again, and her Democrats fall right in line. One, they're in love with terrorists. We see that. They mourn Soleimani more than they mourn our Gold Star families, who are the ones who suffered under Soleimani. That's a problem.
So, the ranking Republican on the Judiciary Committee there, Congressman Doug Collins, has since walked that back today, saying, quote, I do not believe Democrats are in love with terrorists, and I apologize for what I said earlier this week.
Okay. All right. So that's from MSNBC 11th Hour. Go watch that full clip at msnbc.com, right? So Doug Collins from Georgia, ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, he had to walk back those comments. He apologized for that. My question is, why did you say that in the first place? Okay. He said that Democrats love terrorists more than they love Gold Star families. Right? This is what he said. Well, I remember somebody who attacked a Gold Star family. You remember Khizr Khan? You remember that Gold Star family who spoke at the Democratic National Convention? You remember when Donald Trump was running in 2016? He was attacking Khizr Khan, attacking Khizr Khan's wife, and their son died. Okay, their son died he served in the military. I remember Donald Trump attacking the Gold Star family. So, but notice how Republicans don't put Donald Trump in check when he does something like that. You want to say Doug Collins. See, the question I have for Doug Collins is, you apologize, but why did you say that in the first place? You know better than that. Read the article from the Wall Street Journal. Brian Williams that just made reference to it. Trump's new national security team made fast work of Iran strike. So not only did we find out this past week that Mike Pompeo had been urging Trump for months to kill Qasem Soleimani. But we also found out from this article from the Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch. Wall Street Journal is not liberal media. Wall Street Journal is right-wing media. Rupert Murdoch owns the Fox News network that Trump was on when he was interviewed by Laura Ingraham. And then Trump says, "Oh, this is fake news." Really? Now he's not gonna call Rupert Murdoch out. I don't think he's gonna call Rupert Murdoch out by name. But wait a second. The Fox News and the Wall Street Journal are owned by the same person, Rupert Murdoch. Go read this article, and then what you do is Google the name of this article, pull it up that way. That way you can read the full article. I ain't getting into details, but you can do it that way. Trump's new national security team made fast work of Iran strike. Then Washington Post has the article also. Trump now claims 4 embassies were under threat from Iran, raising fresh questions about intelligence reports. Okay, I know we have some guests coming up here in just a minute. Well, I want to go to this other clip here from NBC News. This is 2 minutes. Let's go to this clip here because you have. Let's see, get that. You got the second clip queued up? Okay, just 1 second. So this second clip, I'll go there in just a second. NBC Nightly News. 2 GOP lawmakers slam Trump administration after Iran briefing. So we saw this past week, senators and members of the U.S. House of Representatives had a briefing dealing with Iran, right? Now, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, was interviewed by Andrea Mitchell on Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC. He said, quote, "None of the facts presented at the classified briefing supported that claim that Soleimani was planning an attack on the embassy in Baghdad." And so now you have them saying they can't provide this kind of information to senators in a highly classified setting, but the president is going to say that to the country. It just shows how they're making this up as they go. Now, this is a white senator saying they're making this up as they go. This is the same thing I'm saying. Let's go to this clip here.
Party slamming the Trump administration.
Probably the worst briefing I've seen, at least on a military issue, in the 9 years I've served in the United States Senate.
Republican Senators Mike Lee and Rand Paul calling today's classified briefing with top national security officials, including the Secretaries of State and Defense, a stunt, saying the briefers told them a public debate about war with Iran would empower America's enemies.
I find it insulting and I find it demeaning to the Constitution of the United States, to which we've all sworn an oath.
Our duty under the Constitution is for us to debate when we go to war, and we, for one, are not going to abdicate that duty.
Both senators so angry, they announced they'll support a Democratic effort to force the president to get congressional approval before any escalation with Iran.
I walked into the briefing undecided. I walked out decided, specifically because of what happened in that briefing.
Despite the criticism, most Republicans were satisfied, defending the administration.
They thought that a war powers debate might send the wrong signal to the Iranians. I think they're right. They didn't say you can't debate. I think they're overreacting, quite frankly.
It's a debate that's set to play out on the House floor tomorrow. Democratic leaders planning a vote to limit the president's power to go to war with Iran.
All right, so that was from NBC Nightly News. Check out that clip. Go to NBCnews.com. That is from, I think that was from Friday. I think that's from January 9th or 10th. 2 GOP lawmakers slammed Trump administration after Iran briefing. Now, the first senator you heard there was Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah. And he talked about how he was, he said this was the worst security briefing that he has attended in 9 years, at least dealing with the military, in his 9 years in the Senate. Okay, now you remember Senator Mike Lee. This was the same senator who headed up the committee that was blocking about $200 million being released to Flint, Michigan during the Flint water crisis, when the Flint water crisis was getting all the attention. That's Senator Mike Lee, the same Senator Mike Lee that Roland Martin on Roland Martin's radio show and on the Tom Joyner Morning Show, when I used to guest host Roland Martin's daily radio show, his nationally syndicated radio show. We were urging people to contact Senator Mike Lee to get him to come up off the money. That's Senator Mike Lee. That's who that is. If you forgot, that's who that is. Okay. All right. So we know that we'll pick this up at the beginning of the second hour. I want to shift gears here. We're joined by two guests from Second Baptist Church here in Detroit. We know that Dr. King Day is coming up. They have a Dr. King Day celebration January 20th, 2020, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. We're joined by Cleophas and Frank from Second Baptist Church. How you all doing today?
Very good. Thank you for having us.
All right, no problem, no problem. Thanks for coming out here tonight. Okay, so Second Baptist Church, historic Second Baptist Church, which was the last stop in the Underground Railroad. You all are celebrating Dr. King Day, and this is coming up January 20th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., okay? I've been to the mountaintop. What's next is this year's theme. So give us some information on this, Cleophas.
This is the 34th anniversary of celebration by Second Baptist Church.
Okay.
And this is an outgrowth of something that we started last year when we thought that a unique approach would be the utilization or the combination of an interfaith presentation.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, it was brought to the committee by my colleague Frank here on with me.
Right.
That it would be a great thing, and of course, given the situation and given the tenor of last year and the politics, we felt that that would be something that would be good to do. And so the theme last year was making a difference in difficult times.
Okay.
And, so that's how we came to this year, been to the mountaintop, and so what's next?
Okay. So, Frank, what's going to take place this year, January 20th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. at Second Baptist Church in Detroit?
Well, Mike, what we're going to do is we'll have, well, as you know, last year you moderated the show, and we'll have a gentleman.
Well, I was a speaker.
Yeah, really.
Right.
You were.
And keynote speaker.
And did a marvelous job.
Oh, thank you.
And this year we're going to have another gentleman that will speak, and he will hopefully follow the dynamic dynamic lead you've already set. What we'll do after that is there'll be some joyous singing and praising, and followed by that speaking, we'll have breakout groups, and the breakout groups will discuss the topics of economics, socialization, and religion.
Okay.
As they have moved forward today from the departure of Dr. King.
Okay. So so who's the keynote speaker this year?
The keynote speaker this year is Reverend Joseph Sample.
Okay.
And he's associated or affiliated with the Gethsemane Missionary Baptist Church. Gethsemane.
Yeah.
I've been trying all day.
They're on Westland. Is that the one in Westland?
That is true.
Okay, I spoke there last year, February. Yeah.
Yeah, he's affiliated with that, though not the senior pastor, but he is affiliated with that.
I think I probably met him.
Okay. So that's who our speaker is for this year.
Okay. So what is it that you want people to know about Dr. King? The reason why I ask that is I don't get asked to speak at a lot of Dr. King Day celebrations, and my listeners know this because I deal with the revolutionary Dr. King. Okay, I don't deal with the emasculated Dr. King they show us on the television every Dr. King Day, right? And I attend some Dr. King Day celebrations, sometimes. Sometimes they can be pretty interesting. But what Dr. King is very much misunderstood. Okay, very much misunderstood. So is Malcolm X. Toward the end of both of their lives, Dr. King and Malcolm X's ideologies were converging, and a lot of people don't really notice. One of the best books dealing with that is by James H. Cone, C-O-N-E, who's known as the father of black liberation theology. He wrote a book called Martin Malcolm in America, A Dream or a Nightmare. Martin Malcolm in America, A Dream or a Nightmare. I read that over 20 years ago back in college. So I'm going to ask both of you, starting with Cleophas, what is it that you want, coming away from this, what is it that you want people to take away with them about Dr. King, maybe that they did not already know?
Well, I think that you kind of hit on it, as that he, at that time, was a little different than what most people had expected in terms of his approach to unity, if you will. The nonviolent love thy neighbor was not necessarily the theme of that era that even I grew up in the early 60s or the late 60s. And so it was difficult for most people to accept the fact that once someone did you wrong, that you would turn the other cheek, if you will, and said that love was better than to retaliate. And so as he went along and went on, certainly at the point in time when he was assassinated, that people began to look at that event in a manner that would hopefully let people understand that even all of the love that he spoke of, that hate still in that instance should not have won out. And so what we're trying to do is to bring to the fore this time, or right now, is to show that Dr. King, though it was looked upon as being out of touch at that time, is still the manner and the things that he thought of then are still very, very relevant today and still need to be addressed.
All right, let's go to Frank. Frank, what is it that, at least one thing you want people to take away from this event taking place January 20th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. in the Second Baptist Church? At least one thing you want them to take away about Dr. King that they may not already know.
Well, I don't know that everybody is aware of how he was approaching the economic problem of the country. And that's really where I see a big need for information, and especially as it faces all of us, which is why we put this ecumenical group of churches together. We have the St. Mary's Catholic Church and the Sir Isaac Agreed Synagogue, and we have the Muslim Affair and their group. And as Dr. King spoke, he was addressing all of us in terms of economics and the role of poverty, played in our society and how it affected us. And I think that it would be beneficial to all to start looking at how we're all falling back into the same poverty structure as far as I can see.
Well, we never left it.
Yeah, well, true.
Yeah, it's getting worse. Yeah. I mean, it's getting worse. So, so when we look at Dr. King, when he was assassinated April 4th, 1968, he was leading the Poor People's Campaign. And the Poor People's Campaign consisted not just of poor African Americans, but poor people of different races. And one, he understood that it was getting harder and harder because of the Vietnam War. He understood it was getting harder and harder to get attention to the civil rights movement and to the plight of African Americans. So from 66 to 68, he transitions from civil rights to human rights. And he starts talking more about economics. He starts focusing more on poverty. He, the initiative to have a guaranteed monthly income that Andrew Yang is talking about. Dr. King was pushing that back in 67 to 68. Okay, and it's one city in California where they're trying this. I forgot, on MSNBC they did a story about this. There's one city in California where they're trying, Stockton, California, and they talked about how this is something that Dr. King was championing and pushing before he was assassinated. The year before, in March of 67, Dr. King was interviewed by NBC News. NBC just released it 2 or 3 years ago. It's from March 1967. And it's called Beyond Civil Rights, Black Power. Beyond Civil Rights, Black Power. Everybody should go watch that. It's NBC's website. It's on YouTube also. And in this interview, one of the things he talks about is because of the Vietnam War, it is harder to get attention to issues pertaining to the civil rights movement. And he talks about how incidences that happen before the Vietnam War, it'll make front page news. Now it's on page 16 because the Vietnam War is supplanting that in the on the TVs every night. You only had 3 networks back then: ABC, CBS, NBC. So when we look at the Poor People's Campaign, and we see Reverend William Barber and others have rejuvenated the Poor People's Campaign now. When we look at the Poor People's Campaign, one of the reasons, even though he was a humanitarian and understood poverty impacts everybody, one of the reasons why they had to reach out to other groups is because he understood they could get more accomplished if it wasn't just a quote unquote black thing. If you draw attention to how poverty is impacting poor white people as well, this strengthens your numbers, okay? And they're able to get Medicaid and Medicare signed into law in 1968. All right, let me see, JT, I'm going to send you this clip here in just a second here. This is Dr. King talking about economics, so I think this is the right clip. No, that's not it. It's another one. I'm going to send this to you here in just a second. So, to give people the details, Cleophas, for Monday, January 20th, do people need to register? Is it cost any money? Give people the details.
There is no cost.
Okay.
The program starts at 1 o'clock, and it'll go until approximately 4 o'clock. And that what will happen is that we'll have choirs, we will have a speaker, of course, and then from there we'll go into a breakout session, at which time the 4 elements that Frank spoke of, the social, the political, the economic, and the religious elements will be discussed by members from the various groups who will be there. They will break out into those sessions, and again, there's no cost. As a matter of fact, we're looking to make sure that, being a holiday, as to whether or not even the parking will be free.
Okay.
That's one of the things we're looking at, to make sure that the meters will not be, people will not be impacted by the meter attendance on Monday. But if so, if that is the case, there is still free parking available at Greektown, at the Athenaeum garage across the street from the hotel on Brush. And if you go in there and pay, then, or you go in there, we have a validation so that you don't have to pay to park there. So there should be plenty of parking.
I just sent it to you.
And again, it's open to each and everyone who is available to come out and join with us.
Okay, even if they don't go to church regularly, they can still come?
That's absolutely true.
Go ahead, Frank. Go ahead, Frank. Yes, go ahead.
There'll be free refreshments.
Okay.
And also there will be activities for children.
Okay.
And so if you have your child off, which will be out of school, you might want to bring them along.
Okay. Okay. Now, is there a phone number they can call for more information? Is there a website, anything like that?
Yeah, it's our Second Baptist Church website. Now, what is SBC?
Okay, we'll pull it. We're going to go to this clip. It's 2 minutes. It's Dr. King, and you can pull it up while this clip plays. Go ahead, JT. Play that.
Same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with, and this is a reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
All right. Okay, so that's Dr. King. That's shortly before he's assassinated. That's 1968, and that he's talking about the Poor People's Campaign. Okay, and if you read How White Folks Got So Rich: The Untold Story of American White Supremacy, which is put out by the Nation of Islam Research Group, they actually talk about that. If you look at page 73 and 74 of the third edition, I have all 3 editions, but if you look at pages 73 and 74, they actually have the text of that excerpt of the speech right there. He was speaking at a church in Mississippi, okay, and he's talking about history, and he's talking about how after the Civil War ended, African Americans were locked out of the massive land giveaways, the Southern Homestead Act of 1862, the Homestead Act of 1862, the Southern Homestead Act of 1866, etc. All right, were you able to find the website?
We got a phone number is
phone number.
Second Baptist Church is 313-961-0920.
0920. 313-961-0920.
That's correct.
If you have any more questions, yep, go ahead. And then, okay, and what we'll try to do, we'll put this flyer on our fan page, the African History Network, and my personal page, Michael Imhotep, on YouTube. Let's see here, I'm looking at it. Program, live, musical performance, selections, refreshments, breakout sessions, children activities, and fellowship. Okay. Any last words before we go to break?
No, we just again appreciate you allowing us to come on today, and we invite everyone to come out.
Absolutely. Okay, 441 Monroe Street in Detroit, down in Greektown. Second Baptist Church, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Monday, January 20th, 2020. We know a lot of people will be off work then. And Frank, any last words?
My last words are I have hopes that our speaker does exactly what he intends to do, and that's follow up on the path you set last year. I mean, if you recall, you lit our church up last year.
Okay, yeah, because they were still talking about it some months later. So okay,
yeah,
so that's good.
And that's what we want, and that's what it is. For
right now, also Second Baptist, you all have a bookstore there as well,
yes,
right?
We do.
Okay, will the bookstore be open?
Yes, it will.
Okay, so you have books, you have religious books. So what are some of the types of books that you have there? We got a couple minutes before we go to break. What are some of the types of books you have there?
They run the whole gamut. They're historical pieces, especially about our church.
Okay.
And possibly, as a side note, we will be able to offer some tours of the holding area, the slave holding area. So
exactly.
We have a wide range of activities planned, and the bookstores will be part of that.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Now, so once again, everybody, this is coming up Monday, January 20th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., Second Baptist Church down in Greektown. You have children activities, and in organizing this, say between last year and this year, what was one thing you learned about Dr. King that you didn't already know?
Now that's an interesting question. I guess for me, it was that again that the words he spoke and the efforts that he made or put forth during the early years are still true and they're necessary even today. And when say that he was truly, some folks would call it a prophet, but clearly when he said on his last speech, I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land, and the promised land is still before us, and I think that that's something that clearly needs to be explored and followed through on for the rest of us.
Okay. What about you, Frank?
You know, I think, Mike, I kind of have to harken back to some of the things you spoke on last year, and I do not want to misrepresent what I thought I heard.
Okay,
but I really, I mean, and some of it had to do with the relationship with the Jewish community, and all was not peaches and cream, and when you first look at that relationship, it seems as if it were, and I think I got from your explanation of the dealings with the Jewish community that as strong a Jewish community as we have in this city, that all was not well with King and the Jewish community. Now, did I misunderstand that from you?
Well, I was talking about efforts of people on the outside to divide African Americans and pit Malcolm against Dr. King and pit followers of Dr. King against followers of Malcolm, things like this, because July 31st, 1963, while Malcolm was still in the Nation of Islam, he sent a letter to the leading civil rights leaders, including Dr. King, requesting a meeting with them. And Malcolm was calling for a unification of the civil rights leaders. He said we have to find a common solution to a common problem posed by a common enemy. And then not only that, Dr. King in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos of Community, page 133. He praised the Nation of Islam for their program to rehabilitate African American drug addicts and ex-offenders and things like this. He said that he disagreed with their separatist ideology, but he praised them for the work that they were doing in the community, and he said that African American organizations need to do the same thing, okay, without some of the ideology of the Nation of Islam. So a lot of people don't know this, all right, and the other thing that's really important to understand is when we look at, now I've said this before, this is one reason why I don't get invited to speak. I spoke in 2015 at the Charles H. Wright Museum, and they didn't ask me to come back. Not for that, for not the King Day, but I talked about how the Civil Rights Movement was not a nonviolent movement. And one of my teachers, Professor James Small, who was there, he told me that personally. Because if it had not been for Negroes with guns, there would not have been a Civil Rights Movement. That's not me. If you read the book by Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr., who was a field secretary for SNCC for 5 years in rural Mississippi, he wrote a book called This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed, How Guns Made the Civil Rights Movement Possible. And he talked about how it was African Americans in the South with guns who were protecting the civil rights workers while they did their work. Okay, so there's a whole deep story behind that, because everybody from Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth to Fannie Lou Hamer and others had guns, and we know Dr. King had guns early on, but it was Bayard Rustin who convinced him to get rid of his guns. Dr. King tried to get a concealed pistol license in 1956 in Montgomery, Alabama, after his house was firebombed during the Montgomery bus boycott, but he was denied that concealed pistol license. All right, guys, look, thanks for coming by. We got to go. So everybody stand by. We'll come up on the break. 9:10 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep, the African History Network Show. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network Show right here on 9:10 AM Superstation WFDF. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, January 12th, 2020. And we are live tonight. Hope everybody's doing well. Call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. We're broadcasting on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. We've got Zoom working through the YouTube channel. Michael Imhotep on YouTube, also on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. On Facebook, we're broadcasting there as well, and also on 9:10 AM Superstation's fan page also. Okay, Facebook fan page as well. All right, so African American History Month is coming up. We have a new DVD bundle pack just for you to help educate you and get you topics to talk about during African American History Month as well. It's the Michael Imhotep 15 DVD bundle pack, but they actually added an additional lecture to it, so it's 16 DVDs. It's regularly, I think it's value $250 value, something like that. It's on sale $100 right now. It's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, right on the home page. So I have a lot of present have my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther, lectures dealing with the Tuskegee experiment of untreated syphilis on the Negro male. I have some dealing with economic empowerment. Also, a very important presentation: redistributing the pain. Redistributing the pain. How African Americans historically fought back against white supremacy and racism. And this shows documented cases of us using different types of economic withdrawal strategies to fight back, redistributing the pain. Okay, you can order those DVDs individually at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, but we have them in a bundle pack as well. We just posted the links here on the thread of the broadcast, and it's on the homepage of AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can also donate to the African History Network, PayPal.me/TheAHNShow, and $sign the AHN Show through Cash App. Okay, so in the first hour, we talked about all the changing story going on with the Trump administration when it comes to the killing of Qasem Soleimani. All right, and I shared some articles with you dealing with that. Okay, we'll post the links here on the thread of the broadcast, and we'll give some updates throughout the week as well. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, because I post articles dealing with this on a daily basis. And then we saw Trump lied about President Obama to try to give cover. So it was, I think it was Thursday when he had this little press conference there, and he had all his officials behind him, things like this, right? Associated Press did a fact check. Trump minimizes Trump minimizes Iran state risk, distorts Iran payout. Trump minimizes Iran state risk, distorts Iran payout. Okay, and it talks about how Donald Trump wrongly dismissed the continuing threat of the Islamic State group and spread a false tale of the U.S. paying out billions of dollars to Iran as part of the multinational deal freezing its nuclear program in an address Wednesday. Yeah, that was Wednesday. That fell short on facts. He also made an assertion that is as dubious as it was provocative, that the Iran missiles fired by Tehran is the capital of Iran, at 2 military bases hosting U.S. forces in Iraq were paid for by money, quote unquote, made available to Iran by the Obama administration. All right? So, Trump said 3 months ago, after destroying 100% of ISIS and its territorial caliphate, the facts are his claims of a 100% defeat is misleading, as the Islamic State still poses a threat. All right. Now, he also talked about, he said Iran's hostilities substantially increased after the foolish Iran nuclear deal was signed in 2013, and they were given $150 billion to mention not to mention $1.8 billion in cash. The facts are there was no $150 billion payout from the U.S. Treasury or other countries. When Iran signed the multinational deal to restrain its nuclear development in return for being freed from sanctions, it regained access to its own assets. It regained access to its own assets, which had been frozen abroad. Iran was allowed to get its own money back. The deal actually was signed in 2015 after a 2013 preliminary agreement. Trump has taken the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear agreement. He's basically reversing everything President Obama, because he has such an antipathy and hatred for President Obama. He's just trying to destroy everything President Barack Obama did. The $1.8 billion is a separate matter. A payout of roughly that amount did come from the U.S. Treasury. It was to pay an old IOU. In the 1970s, Iran paid the U.S. $400 million for military equipment that was never delivered because the government was overthrown and diplomatic relations ruptured. After the nuclear deal, the U.S. and Iran announced they had settled the matter, with the U.S. agreeing to pay the $400 million principal along with about $1.3 billion in interest. The $400 million was paid in cash and flown to Tehran on a cargo plane, which gave rise to Trump's previous dramatic accounts of money stuffed in barrels or boxes and delivered in the dead of night. The arrangement provided for the interest to be paid later, not crammed into containers. Okay, read this in its entirety. APnews.com, AP fact check, Trump minimizes IS risk, Islamic State IS risk, distorts Iran payout. Yahoo News picked this up as well. Now a lot of news outlets were exposing this lie that Trump was telling. Okay, he always tries to point to something President Barack Obama did to give cover to what Trump is doing. And also this past week, more and more people were talking about what we talked about last Sunday, how the CIA, along with British intelligence in 1953, overthrew the democratically elected prime minister of Iran, who was Mohammad Mossadegh. Okay, Mohammad Mossadegh, Mossadegh. Okay, so more and more people were talking about that this week. I talked about that on last Sunday's show. If you read the article from NPR.org, National Public Radio, how the CIA overthrew Iran's democracy in 4 days. This is going to lead to the Iranian Revolution in 1975, which leads to the Iran hostage crisis in 1979 as well. And then right after Reagan is inaugurated, the hostages are released. Okay, so check that out as well. All this is connected. All right, now, January 1st, New Year's Day, I did a broadcast early in the week that talked about why African Americans eat black-eyed peas on New Year's Day. Okay, and it goes back to us being in the South, but also black-eyed peas come from West Africa as well. They're also called cowpeas. So check out that broadcast. We dealt with it a little bit on last week's show. But New Year's Day, January 1st, 1863, was when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by President Lincoln. All right? So History.com has this article, as well as EJI.org, Equal Justice Initiative, which is Brian Stevenson's organization. And we know the movie is out, Just Mercy, which is about Brian Stevenson and a case that he handled. It stars Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Foxx. All right, but History.com, which is the official website of the History Channel, has a really good article dealing with this. And this is dealing with Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, attempting to stitch together a nation mired in a bloody civil war. Lincoln made a last-ditch but carefully calculated decision regarding the institution of slavery in America. Okay? Now, contrary to what they teach our children in school today, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free enslaved Africans. Okay, I encourage people to go to archives.gov. Archives.gov is the official website of the National Archives. Search for Emancipation Proclamation. Or go to LOC.gov. LOC.gov is the Library of Congress. Okay, and when you read the Emancipation Proclamation, it has all these exceptions. Okay, it talks about how the slaves in the border states are not free. It only applied to the slaves in the states in rebellion, the Confederate territories. Okay, enslaved Africans in places like Missouri and Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland. Those were border states. They were still slaves. It only applied to the states in rebellion. It was a military strategy to bring the South back into the Union. The reason why the Civil War was fought, okay, when the Civil War starts, so it starts with South Carolina secedes from the Union December 20th, 1860, okay, and when Lincoln this is 6 weeks after Abraham Lincoln becomes president-elect. He becomes president-elect, I think it was November 6, 1860. He becomes president-elect of the newly formed Republican Party. Republican Party was formed in 1854 by groups of abolitionists. The Republican Party was formed as a backlash to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 dealt with letting the inhabitants, letting those who were going into the Western territories determine whether or not they wanted to have slavery in the Western territories, as opposed to it being dictated to them by the federal government. 1852, Harriet Beecher Stowe comes out with her novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, that becomes an international bestseller. It exposes people across America to the horrors of slavery, and the character of Uncle Tom is based upon the fictitious character of Uncle Tom is based upon the real life person of Josiah Henson, who was a runaway slave from Maryland who becomes an abolitionist. He and his family run away. They go up north and then go into Canada. And he becomes an abolitionist on the Underground Railroad. He becomes a Methodist minister. He becomes an educator, and he writes his autobiography. The fictitious character of Uncle Tom was based upon the real life of Josiah Henson, or based upon Josiah Henson, based upon his autobiography. Okay, there's an episode of The Jeffersons where Louise's cousin, who is a butler, and George says that he speaks proper and sedity. He comes to visit, and George calls him, or actually Lionel calls him an Uncle Tom. George calls him an Uncle Tom also. And he schools them on who the real Uncle Tom was. He talks about Josiah Henson, all right? That's just a little background information. Because a lot of these TV shows, they drop some history in there also. You may not pick up on it. You know, there's an early episode of Good Times. Actually, I think it was episode 2, Black Jesus. And it's before 76. And Michael talks about Black History Week, because it became a month in 1976. But he talks about, I think it was Muhammad Speaks, where they talked about the true color of Jesus. And JJ paints Black Jesus, and they put up on the wall, and his mother, Florida Evans, played by Esther Rowe, fantastic actress. She is surprised to find out that in the Bible, it talks about Jesus having feet that were bronze and hair like wool. Now, she's been a Christian all her life, and she ain't noticed. So, yeah, calling me to ask the question, what have you been studying, right? But all that's in that first episode. Like in the first few minutes of that episode, they're dropping this history. But anyway, so attempting to stitch together a nation mired in a bloody civil war, Abraham Lincoln made a last-ditch but carefully calculated decision regarding the institution of slavery in America. Now, keep in mind, Lincoln was not an abolitionist. I know people want to paint Lincoln as an abolitionist. He was not an abolitionist. Because Lincoln was confused really what to do about slavery. He thought slavery was morally wrong, but he didn't know what to do about it. Abolitionists knew what to do about it. Abolitionists were fighting to end slavery. They were fighting to help enslaved Africans run away. They were fighting to end slavery. There's another article from history.com that people should read. And it deals with, I think it's 5 facts about Abraham Lincoln and slavery, something like that. And one of them deals with how Lincoln was not an abolitionist. Now, by the end of 1862, things were not looking good for the Union. The Confederate Army had overcome Union troops in significant battles, and Britain and France were set to officially recognize the Confederacy as a separate nation. In an August 1862 letter to New York Tribune, editor Horace Greeley, Lincoln confessed, quote, "My paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or to destroy slavery," end quote. Okay, this is 1862. It's August of 1862. The Civil War starts April 12th, 1861. So this is about a year, 4 months into the Civil War. Lincoln is saying, my paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or to destroy slavery. Malcolm X talked about how Abraham Lincoln used freeing the slaves as a political football. Okay? This is what he was talking about. Lincoln used freeing the slaves as a political football. Lincoln's main objective was to save the Union. And at his March 4th, 1861 inaugural address, Lincoln said that he had no intentions to end slavery in states where slavery still existed, because by February of 1861, you had about 7 states that had already seceded from the Union, starting with South Carolina, December 20th, 1860. Lincoln is trying to stop the secession. Okay, so he talked about how he had no intention of ending slavery in the states that where slavery continued to exist, and this infuriated a lot of abolitionists like Frederick Douglass. Okay, so Lincoln hoped that declaring a national policy of emancipation would stimulate a rush of the South slaves into the ranks of the Union Army, thus depleting the Confederacy's labor force on which the Southern states depended to wage war against the North. He's trying to rob them of their asset, of the enslaved Africans. Okay, Lincoln hoped that declaring a national policy of emancipation would stimulate a rush of the South's slaves into the ranks of the Union Army, thus depleting the Confederacy's labor force on which the Southern states depended to wage war against the North. All right, Lincoln wanted to unveil the proclamation until he waited to unveil the proclamation until he could do so on the heels of a Union military success. On September 22nd, 1862, after the battle at Antietam, he issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation declaring all slaves free in the rebellious states as of January 1st, 1863. Lincoln and his advisors limited the proclamation's language to slavery in states outside of federal control as of 1862, failing to address the contentious issue of slavery within the nation's border states. We're going to pick this up on the other side of the break, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio, the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, January 12th, 2020. And we're live. We're broadcasting on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Follow us on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Also turn on the notifications so you know when we go live. And then also follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Turn on notifications so you know when we go live there as well. All right. At our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, just in time for African American History Month, we have a 15 DVD bundle pack of some of my lectures. And then I just added one additional DVD to it, Breaking the Chains, while we celebrate Black History Month. Okay, so that's on sale right now. It's on sale only $100 at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, on sale for a limited time only. And then also we posted that on our fan page, The African History Network. So we have orders shipping out this week. On YouTube, we have Libra Goddess and who is this? Debitness, Ronald Williams, Libra Goddess, who else on YouTube watching us? Moni J, Derek, Nayu Sayer, The Hairstons, Eric Holston, just a few people watching us on YouTube. And then also on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, we got Keith Smith, we got Shionika joining in, Mark, who else we have here? Mimi, Teresa, John Ray, Natty, Calvin, just a few people watching us on Facebook. Okay, so right before the break, I was talking about January 1st, this past January 1st being the anniversary of the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation. History.com has a really good article, Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. Unfortunately, many people still think it was the Emancipation Proclamation that freed enslaved Africans, and it was not. It was a military strategy. It was a strategy to bring the South back into the Union. Okay, so we're dealing with this history. I encourage people to go to history.com, go to archives.com, the National Archives, archives.com. You can read the Emancipation Proclamation there for yourself. You know, take my word for it. Proper documentation ends all conversation. You don't have to believe me. You go research this for yourself. Okay, go to archives.com, just search for Emancipation Proclamation. All right, so Lincoln waited to unveil the Emancipation Proclamation until he could do so on the heels of a Union's military success. So the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation was issued September 22nd, 1862, after the Civil War battle at Antietam. Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation declaring all slaves free in the rebellious states as of January 1st, 1863, unless those territories in rebellion came back into the Union. Okay, now so when these states seceded from the Union, these territories seceded from the Union, they set up their own government, they set up their own monetary system. All right, so you don't have any authority over them because they set up their own country. Okay, so Lincoln and his advisors limited the proclamation's language to slavery in states outside of federal control as of 1862, failing to address the contentious issue of slavery within the nation's border states. In his attempt to appease all parties, Lincoln left many loopholes open that civil rights advocates would be forced to tackle in the future. Republican abolitionists in the North rejoiced that Lincoln had finally thrown his full weight behind the cause for which they had elected him. Those slaves in the South failed to rebel en masse with the signing of the proclamation. They slowly began to liberate themselves as Union armies marched into Confederate territory. Toward the end of the war, which ends in 1865, enslaved Africans left their former masters in droves. They fought and grew crops for the Union Army, performed other military jobs, and worked in the North's mills, in the factories. Though the proclamation was not greeted with joy by all Northerners, particularly Northern white workers and troops fearful of job competition from an influx of freed slaves, it had the distinct benefit of convincing Britain and France to steer clear of official diplomatic relations with the Confederacy. So when you look at the Civil War, the question we should ask ourselves, because see, after the Civil War ends, so you had the Freedmen's Bureau, right? the U.S. Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands. And the Freedmen's Bureau is not just going to assist black freedmen, former slaves. It's also going to assist poor, destitute white people, because the Civil War destroys a lot of the South, destroys plantation, knocks out bridges, knocks out prisons, destroys the Southern way of life largely. Okay? The question we should ask ourselves is, we have to look at this, right? The majority of the people who fought on behalf of the South in the Civil War were not the wealthy plantation owners. They were not the wealthy slave owners. The majority of them were poor white people who didn't own slaves. Poor white men who didn't own slaves. The majority. Now you're gonna have some exceptions. You're gonna have some wealthy white men who own slaves and plantations, things like this, who fought in the Civil War. But that's not the majority of them. Majority of them were poor white men who didn't own slaves. They're fighting to maintain something they don't have. Think about this. They're fighting. So when you read the statements of secession, the statements of secession were the statements the statements that the southern states wrote declaring that they were breaking away from the Union. Okay? One of the original Brexits, right? They were breaking away from the Union. They talked about how slavery was central to their way of life, central to their wealth. The statements of secession from Mississippi, from Texas, etc. But most of the white people weren't wealthy. Most of the white men fighting in the Civil War on behalf of the South were not wealthy. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how did the wealthy white people who benefited from the poor white people fighting in the Civil War, how did they convince the poor white people to go risk their lives and fight in the Civil War and fight for something they didn't have? What they told them was, if the slaves are freed, they're going to take your jobs. What they didn't realize was the slaves were already doing their jobs and they were doing it for free. Because there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. The enslaved Africans were already doing the jobs and they were doing it for free. This is what they didn't realize. They fell for the okie doke. Okay? The descendants of those same wealthy people are the same people who are saying that undocumented immigrants are taking jobs from people here in America, while the corporations continue to profit off of the labor of undocumented immigrants and continue to exploit their labor. Well, at the same time, you got corporations like General Electric that are creating automation that has eliminated millions of middle-class jobs. So see, you got to understand history. If you look at what Trump is doing today and the rhetoric Trump was talking about in 2016, all this deals with the fear of the browning of America, 2043. When the U.S. Census Bureau predicts that white people will no longer be the majority population in this country. Some white people, not all of them, but some white people fear what's going to happen, and they fear what's called the browning of America, right? So you had Trump in 2016 talking about undocumented immigrants taking your jobs and things like this. He wasn't then, and today he ain't talking about the corporations that exploit the labor of undocumented immigrants. He's not talking about cracking down on those corporations because he's one of them. At the same time, he's not talking about corporations that put out automation that have eliminated millions of middle-class jobs and will continue to do so. Middle-class and low-wage jobs. There was a study that came out. I did a broadcast. This was, I think, October, November. It's on YouTube and Facebook. Go back and watch it. BlackEnterprise.com had an article dealing with how over the next 10 years, it's estimated that up to 4.5 million jobs held by African Americans will be eliminated by automation. Trump ain't talking about something like that, right? The same way they con poor white people to go risk their lives to fight in the Civil War, while the wealthy were the ones who reap the same majority of the benefits. It's the same thing going on right now with undocumented immigrants. It's the same thing going on. They're telling you they're taking away something that you have, while at the same way, the wealthy are taking that away from the poor whites and poor people in general. It's the same game being played. They're trying to take away the health care and doing it. You got less people. If you read the report that just came out by the every September, Census Bureau puts out a report dealing with income and poverty, income and poverty and wages. They talk about how less people have health care under Trump than under President Obama because of the Affordable Health Care Act. Trump is attacking that. If you look at, we just posted the information from the Brookings Institute. Okay, I talked about this 2 weeks ago, where 44% of the jobs Americans have are low-wage paying jobs. Median annual income is $18,000 with about 44% of these jobs. So Trump talks about all these jobs, booming economy, but at least almost half these jobs are low-wage paying jobs. Okay, but he talks about the stock market. But the stock market is not a good indicator of the overall economy. Then if you look at the article from news1.com that just came out, and I'm not going to have time to talk about it tonight. We'll probably talk about this next week. This is one I was looking at. It's talking about the new jobs numbers that just came out. And it's talking about how the unemployment rate for African-American men increased. So the first Friday of each month, the new unemployment numbers come out. Now there are 6 different unemployment rates, U1 through U3. U1 through U6. The U3 number is the one that you hear in all the headlines. Okay? U3 deals with people who have actively looked for a job in the past 4 weeks. Go to BLS.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.gov, and search for how is the unemployment rate calculated. Okay? So, because they'll break this down and they'll deal with the 6 different unemployment rates. The same game that was played during the Civil War, and then even after the Civil War, because you had immigrants coming to this country, and their labor was being exploited in the factories. Because this is largely before you have factory regulations. This is before you have labor movements. This is before you got an 8-day work week. This is before you have a 8-hour work day, and you have children working in the factories, things like this, right? So the same wealthy people who profited off of poor white people going and fighting the Civil War and risk their lives to maintain a lifestyle that they didn't even to maintain a lifestyle they didn't even enjoy largely. These are the same ones who will exploit the labor of immigrants coming to this country and having them work in factories. Poorly ventilated factories, low wages, very little rights. You don't have the rights of the unions. You don't have the fair wages, the 2-week vacations, all this stuff. That stuff don't exist back then, right after the Civil War ends. That doesn't exist. And then African Americans largely are being locked out of these jobs also. Okay? And what's going to happen is you're going to have labor unions that are being formed to protect jobs for white men, lock African Americans out of these jobs. And now that we can compete for these jobs, and we have been doing a lot of this work for years, because there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that we had in this country from 1619 to 1865. The book, The Other Slaves by Ronald Lewis, and I forgot the other author's name. Okay, just Google The Other Slaves, artisans, craftsmen. They break this down. At the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, when you go through their main display, And Still We Rise, and you go through the replica of the slave ship, and you come out on the other side, and they take you throughout history, throughout slavery. They have a big display on the wall showing all these skills, trades, and crafts. And I went through that display a few years ago, right? And there's a sign there that says you can't take pictures. So I went home, got a pen and pad, came back, and I spent an hour writing them down, and I numbered them. That's how I know they're 262, because they weren't numbered. So the same game that we see being played then, we see being played now, because it worked. And people still haven't figured this out. All right, so when we look at this here, Republican abolitionists in the North rejoiced that Lincoln had finally thrown his full weight behind the cause for which they had elected him. Those slaves in the South failed to rebel en masse with the signing of the proclamation. They slowly began to liberate themselves as Union armies marched into Confederate territory. Toward the end of the war, slaves left their former masters in droves. They fought and grew crops for the Union Army, performed other military jobs, and worked in the northern mills. This is creating competition for jobs, working in the northern mills. Though the proclamation was not greeted with joy by all Northerners, particularly Northern white workers and troops, fearful of job competition from an influx of freed slaves. It had the distinct benefit of convincing Britain and France to steer clear of official diplomatic relations with the Confederacy. So what's going to happen after the Civil War ends, this is where you have a lot of large labor unions. The National Labor Union, okay, which is founded about 1866, and the American Federation of Labor, things like this. And they're organized to protect jobs for white men and lock African Americans out of these jobs. All right? Many of these jobs we have been doing for free for years. Now that we can compete for wages, now we're trying to be locked out of these jobs and then locked back into agriculture, whether it's sharecropping, okay, something like that, domestic work. So this what takes place. So I'm not against unions, I'm just against unions discriminating against African Americans. Though the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation signified Lincoln's growing resolve to preserve the Union at all costs, he still rejoiced in the ethical correctness of his decision. Lincoln admitted on that day, on that New Year's Day in 1863, that he never, quote, felt more certain that I was doing right than I do in signing this paper, end quote. Although he waffled on the subject of slavery in the early years of his presidency, he would thereafter be remembered as, quote, the great emancipator, end quote. But the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free the enslaved Africans. To Confederate sympathizers, however, Lincoln's signing of the Emancipation Proclamation reinforced their image of him as a hated despot and ultimately inspired his assassination by John Wilkes Booth on April 14, 1865. Read this article at history.com. Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation January 1st, 1863. Okay, check out that article. They have a number of good articles there. And one of my favorite ones, and this is coming up here, it's running slowly. 5 things you may not know about Lincoln, slavery, and emancipation. 5 things you may not know about Lincoln, slavery, and emancipation. I think number one is Lincoln wasn't an abolitionist. The 16th president was firm in believing slavery was morally wrong, but his views on racial equality were sometimes more complicated. All right, so this past week I saw some articles dealing with Nipsey Hussle. We know his marathon album went platinum, went platinum. But also I saw articles dealing with the Marathon Book Club. Okay, AtlantaBlackStar.com, it's a good article. Marathon Book Club opens throughout the U.S. in honor of Nipsey Hussle. This is from January 8th, 2020 by Daryl Nelson. So Nipsey Hussle has been honored in a variety of ways since he was killed on March 31st, 2019. And one of those ways comes through something called the Marathon Book Club. According to the LA Times, book clubs have been set up in different parts of the United States so people can read and discuss the books that Nipsey Hussle read. Various chapters of the Marathon Book Club have begun in different parts of the United States in honor of Nipsey Hussle. In April of 2019, one of his fans took to Twitter and shared a list of the reading material the late rapper mentioned in his songs and other places. And today, the Marathon Book Club has chapters in Washington, D.C., New York, Oakland, and Los Angeles. Hopefully, there'll be one in Detroit. Some of the books, the fan listed include "Blood in My Eye" by George Jackson, former member of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. I think that's the George Jackson they're referring to. "How to Eat to Live," and "Message to the Black Man" by Elijah Muhammad. "The Way of the Superior Man" by David Deida, D-E-I-D-A, and "The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing" by Al Reese and Jack Trout. So I read that book. I have a background in marketing. right? I read the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing back in college. Al Reese and Jack Trout, these guys are like the Hall and Notes of marketing, okay? Al Reese and Jack Trout are like the Hall and Notes of marketing. They've written a number of books. A really good book they wrote, I think it came out after 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. It's called Positioning the Battle for Your Mind. Positioning the Battle for Your Mind. Now, Nipsey Hussle's girlfriend and mother of his son, Lauren London, spoke about his love of reading in April of last year, 2019, April of 2019, and the actress said he was always looking to learn more. Okay, she told the Los Angeles Times, quote, "We read a lot of books together. We inspired each other to be better versions of ourselves. We inspired each other to be better versions of ourselves. He was a truth seeker and a truth speaker." Now, on September 2nd of 2019, The Game shared one of his many Instagram posts about Hussle's, the hip-hop artist The Game, and said he often encouraged him to read. He said, quote, "My last few times spent in his presence, it was all smiles, laughs, and jokes. He stayed trying to get me to read books and strengthen my knowledge in all areas of life. A specific time was earlier this year in the studio parking lot. I was coming and he was going. He said, we stopped, dapped, hugged each other, DAP, D-A-P-P-E-D, but DAP is actually an acronym, D-A-P, which means dignity and power, and the DAP that brothers do was created during the Vietnam War by African-American men in the Army because the Black Power salute was banned by the military because white officers and white servicemen thought the Black Power salute was threatening. So brothers created the handshake, the DAP, which means dignity and power, as a bond between African-American servicemen in the Vietnam War, as a way of greeting each other, but also a bond saying, I'll watch your back and you'll watch mine. I'm not above you, you're not above me. Because there were cases of African-American men in Vietnam being shot by friendly fire, by being shot by their own side in war. And there were also cases of brothers being put in the stockade, the military prison, for doing the Black Power salute in the military because it was banned. This is during the 60s. So blackden.com has a article dealing with the history of the DAP. And there was an exhibit, there's a museum that has an exhibit that deals with this history as well. And so the brothers start to develop these elaborate DAPs, and you can tell the region or the state or city that a brother was from by the type of DAP that he did as well. It's a deep, rich history behind that. So we go from the symbolism of the DAP, we go back in ancient history to the metal netter, we go back to African people creating the first known alphabet, the first language, etc. But we see this also in the DAP as well. All right, so The Game said, quote, "We stopped, dapped, hugged each other, and proceeded to walk off. And when I got to the studio door, he said, quote, Chuck, you read that book I told you to get?" So this is what The Game said. He said, "Chuck, you read that book I told you to get?" That's what Nipsey Hussle said to him. Now, Hussle was killed in front of his Marathon clothing store in the Hyde Park section of Los Angeles, close to where he grew up. The suspect, Eric Holder, was captured 2 days later in Bellflower, California, about 20 miles southeast of the clothing store. He's still behind bars, awaiting trial, and has pleaded not guilty. All right. So, message to the black man, 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver, also Black Panther. Let's see, let me look at some of these other ones. 3 Magic Words, The Spook Who Sat by the Door by Sam Greenlee. I actually met Sam Greenlee years ago. Sam Greenlee passed away a few years ago, his ancestor, but I met him. Piper Carter did a screening of his movie, Sam Greenlee's movie, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, a few years ago. I was at that screening and met Sam Greenlee. He signed a copy of the DVD for me. He said the DVD was free, but his autograph was $20. Let's see, How to Eat to Live, Elijah Muhammad, Contagious, Conspicuous Capitalism, John McKay. And, okay. All right, so check out this article from AtlantaBlackStar.com and also the one from Los Angeles Times as well. All right, so 2019 was the year of return. We saw a number of stories. You know, I was covering this going back to December of 2018, going into January 1st, New Year's Day of 2019. FaceToFaceAfrica.com has a really good article. Idris Elba and other black Americans who have been granted African citizenship. Idris Elba and other black Americans who have been granted African citizenship. And it talks about how in 2019 witnessed a lot of celebrities and business executives visiting Africa for various reasons. While some came to trace their roots, others were just for the fun fair. Ghana in particular was the main center of attraction. After it declared 2019 a year of return, the West African country was host to several foreigners, especially U.S.-based celebrities. So we know the president of Ghana granted citizenship, Ghanaian citizenship, to 126 African diasporians. Also, going back to December of 2018 into January 1st of 2019, Boris Kodjoe welcomed about 40 or so African-American celebrities. I covered that story as well, so we have a video of that on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. Now, big names like Black Panther star Lupita Nyong'o and Beyonce's mother Tina Knowles Lawson, Bozoma St. John, Boris Kodjoe, Nicole Ari Parker, his wife Diggy Simmons, Michael Jai White, Anthony Anderson of the TV show Blackish, Rosario Dawson, Jendana, Cynthia Bailey, Steve Harvey were in Ghana. Others were Samuel L. Jackson, singer Deborah Cox, Ernie Smith, Urban Mayfield, reggae band Third World, Ludacris, Cardi B. Cardi B was just in Ghana, I think Nigeria also. Rick Ross, I know Cardi B was in Ghana. And on her Instagram page, she is talking about moving to Nigeria because of Trump's attack on Iran. All right. So check out this article from FaceToFaceAfrica.com dealing with this as well. They deal with a number of celebrities. You'll see more articles dealing with this. We know Nigeria is doing something similar to the year of return as well. When we look at Ludacris, rapper Ludacris, like a number of his colleagues, spent 3 weeks in Africa to mark the year of return festivities. He went to Gabon, the birth country of his wife, before visiting Ghana, and he was granted citizenship in Gabon as well. The Fast and Furious star with his family was presented with Gabonese passports, and it was reported that his entire family were at the office of the Gabon Minister of Foreign Affairs. And we see other celebrities as well. Let's see if we can squeeze some of these in also. Samuel L. Jackson as well. Actor Samuel L. Jackson became a Gabonese citizen after tracing his ancestry to the Benga tribe, B-E-N-G-A. According to The Guardian, theguardian.co.uk, quote, Jackson traced his roots to the Bantu tribe in Gabon. So we know the Bantu are throughout southern Africa, East Africa, going into West Africa, going into Cameroon, the Bantu, B-A-N-T-U. We know the language spoken in the film Black Panther is isiXhosa, which is a Bantu language as well. The Bantu people are speakers of Bantu languages, Kiswahili, isiXhosa, Zulu, Amazulu. These are all Bantu languages, comprising several hundred indigenous ethnic groups in sub-Saharan Africa, spreading over a vast area from Central Africa across the African Great Lakes to Southern Africa. After finding his roots, Jackson visited Gabon, where he met with the president, Ali Bongo Ondimba, O-N-D-I-M-B-A, and his wife. All right, so, and let's see if we get one more in here. And then also Idris Elba. So actor Idris Elba was given citizenship of his father's native country on his first visit to Sierra Leone, which is in West Africa. Speaking to the BBC, he said, quote, the biggest honor I could get from my country the biggest honor I could get from my country, end quote. I'm no stranger to Africa. I've been in Africa. I've made films in Africa. I've championed Africa, he said. But Sierra Leone, it's a very different feeling because it's my parents' home. All right, so check out this article here from face-to-faceafrica.com. Idris Elba and other black Americans who have been granted African citizenship. This is from January 3rd, 2020. Face-to-faceafrica.com. Face the number 2, faceafrica.com. All right, well, look. Okay, we got a few minutes here. Let me see if I can pull up this article from newsone.com. All right, how's everybody doing? Those watching us on Facebook and YouTube, be sure to visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Now, look, Dr. King Day is coming up January 20th. Now, if you want me to speak at your Dr. King Day celebration, it looks like I'm free. Email me, customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, or give us a call, 313-462-0003, 313-462-0003, and we'll probably make that happen. All right, now, let me see if it's, I want to give you a couple of other articles here. You know, last week we talked about the Iran hostage crisis, and some people may have missed this article. This is from history.com also. U.S.-Iran tensions from the hostage crisis to sanctions to drone strikes. U.S.-Iran tensions from the hostage crisis to sanctions to drone strikes. All right, so check that out from history.com. I did a broadcast earlier today dealing with the Madam C.J. Walker movie. It's a 4-part movie that's going to be on Netflix, okay? So that premieres March 20th, okay? And that's called Self-Made. Everybody check that out. It stars Octavia Spencer as Madam C.J. Walker, and I dealt with some of the history of Madam C.J. Walker, but also Annie Turnbull Malone. Now, Annie Turnbull Malone was the mentor of Madam C.J. Walker, and she was the one who really created the black hair care industry. A lot of people don't know this. Annie Turnbull Malone hired Sarah Breedlove in 1905, and Sarah Breedlove was Madam C.J. Walker's real name, and she hired her as a salesperson, okay? And it's a deep, rich history. They had a rivalry, and Annie Turnbull Malone accused Madam C.J. Walker of stealing, you know, her ideas and things like this for the Walker wonderful hair grower. But check out the broadcast I did earlier today, okay? Next week, one of the things we'll talk about next week is who was the first black president in North America? Who was the first black president in North America? If you said it was Barack Obama, no, it was not Barack Obama. I wish he was back in the White House as opposed to this idiot we have now. But that would be Vicente Guerrero of Mexico. And he was a former slave. He had African ancestry, okay? We'll talk some about that next week on the African History Network show. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo right here on 910 AM Superstation Future Radio. Be sure to follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and follow me on YouTube, Michael Imhotep. Also, Michael Imhotep on Instagram, and the AHNShow on Twitter as well. All right. Check out my broadcasts I do throughout the week on Facebook and YouTube. You can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHNShow, paypal.me/the AHNShow. Then also through Cash App, $, the AHNShow through Cash App also, okay? If you look and check out the article from Deadline.com, Netflix sets premiere date for Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker, unveils first look at Octavia Spencer limited series. So I did a in-depth broadcast earlier today dealing with that. You can check that out as well. All right, hey, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. Remember, right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next week. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo, Listen to 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio, the African History Network show. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.